Hello everybody, welcome to this video where I'm going to be updating you on what I have been doing. In this case, this is February 8th, 2025 update. And I think the last time I spoke like this was with a video that I made on, well, actually the last couple of videos that I have been making where I have been actually showing my face and being direct, live and direct, have been the freestyle sessions. The freestyle sessions, I kind of started making them because I felt like I needed to practice my freestyle, and I have a big project planned for, I don't know if it's going to be this year or next year, where I'm going to be dropping an album with beats made by AI. So my intention by using the beats made by AI is that I can actually market them and pay to have them marketed, and then maybe I can get a little bit of recognition or noticed with those beats. But anyway, that's why I did the freestyle sessions more than anything, so I can practice a little bit my rhyming skills, rhyming abilities. And before that, before I started making all the stories about 2 weeks ago, I made a video called Euphemisms, where I talk about these opposites or paradoxical and contradicting words, right? But ever since then, I have been making AI generated videos, stories, mainly stories. Some have been on information, and there's actually a section called 2025.2, and that playlist has videos generated also by AI and CapCut, where I basically where those videos basically talk about information, right? But then the 2025 original playlist mainly has either these type of videos where I'm talking about something, and you can find them because they are all lowercase. Even the first letter is lowercase. But in this case, this update, I don't know if I'm gonna do it lowercase or uppercase. But other than that, all of the other things on this 2025 playlist are basically stories generated by AI. Now, what I mean by AI is ChatGPT. So what I do, and if you want me to make a video on this, I can, because it's very simple. I can make a story from nothing and have it on YouTube within like probably 10 minutes, right? Just like that, with a picture and everything and the subtitles. So what I do is I ask like ChatGPT, like, make me a story about this, right? And what you do is you feed it prompts, right? So I want the story to be about this. The ending has to have a twist, or it has to have this happened, right? And then you ask ChatGPT for the title and the description with emojis and hashtags, which is typically what I do. And then you ask it for an image related to the story, right? So this is like all done with ChatGPT, and then as soon as I have it, I take it on over to text to speech in CapCut, and then basically just add the image and then download the video and then upload it to YouTube. Copy paste the title, description, and have it done, right? You can actually, which I have done this with with like the love stories edition, which were actually 10 love stories, and this type of like drama, Mexican drama stuff, like stories, religious, religious stories. I have done this with ChatGPT's help. So I have asked actually ChatGPT to give me like 10 stories, just like the description of them, and then I refeed it back to ChatGPT, and then it just gives me like the whole story of, but this is time consuming because they were 10 stories. But I actually finished this, and what I've noticed is that there's actually like a viewership in Spanish right now. Sometimes I make videos in Spanish, sometimes I make them in English, sometimes I speak in Spanish, sometimes I speak in English, sometimes I rap in English, sometimes I rap in Spanish. But I think my go-to language, unfortunately, is English. So what I want to do is maybe shift a little bit more towards Spanish, since I'm seeing that there's a bigger viewership here for Spanish than English. And actually the most popular video, which is still growing, it has 13,000 views so far, It's this story about a teacher and a student. They get together, they break up, and then they get together again. And it has 13,000 views, and it's the most watched video that I have so far. And I think thanks to it, I've I've now climbed with viewership. So I have 103 subscribers right now and 787 videos thus far. But I'm pretty sure it's because of the stories, right? Now, some of the other stories are catching up. Like in eighth place and most popular is already one called Segundas Oportunidades, which is also in Spanish. And then there's another one which is in 10th place, and another one which is in 13th place, I think. So these are climbing up. And this is also why I've been doing these stories, because they're pretty easy to make. And you can actually make any type of story that you want. You can, say, oh, a story about this would be interesting. And then you just feed it to ChatGPT and it basically breaks it down. You use CapCut, right, to make the video, like text to speech. So it's actually, so you can hear it, and I'm thinking you could actually even add like music or background music if you want. I haven't done that, but I'm thinking that would be like more time consuming, and I'm just trying to make these like express, right? Um, so that's as far as the YouTube stuff. I'm just having fun here. I think I'm gonna continue to do this with AI, with ChatGPT and CapCut until like it gets banned or something. But it's very simple because, like I said, you just have to look for the information with ChatGPT and then just do the rest. Quite simple. So that's as far as stories. As far as information wise, is just things that you want to know more of, right? Like I have something here on philosophy. I uploaded an Imago video, excuse me, in Spanish. So if you want to check that one out on pride and neurosis, and information, just like the other day I was asking ChatGPT to give me like specifications or examples on Kierkegaard's ideas on the self, which I didn't know Kierkegaard talked about the self, but I guess all philosophers talked about all the major philosophical and sometimes psychological ideas like the self. And ChatGPT explained it to me, and I was just like, "Yo, ChatGPT, like now write a report on it, right? Like make it like an essay kind of, but not that long. Write a report on it." And then so ChatGPT gives me the report, and then that's what I feed to CapCut, and then I just make the video, right? And I'm thinking this is kind of like when you want to know something, well, you look for it online, right? Or you look for it in a YouTube video or wherever, TikTok. But you can actually make your own video, right? With ChatGPT, like I want to know why the sky is blue. So you ask ChatGPT, make a report, make a video of it, and then watch the video, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of these videos, I haven't watched them, and I don't even know what they're about because I didn't read the text, right? I just like told it like give me, especially with the 10 love stories and the 10 religious kind of weird stories. I just fed it to ChatGPT and then just told it like give me the story. I copied and pasted the story, and that's it, right? So I haven't even seen a lot of them. But yeah, I'm just like experimenting, trying to see where this takes us. Again, I am going to be working eventually on an album. I want it to be a big album with actual like really good songs, game changing songs. But again, that's probably gonna take like a while. I don't know if this year or next year. We're still in the beginning of the year. It's still early in the year, February. But who knows, right? Maybe I'll get pumped up around spring, since that's like the beginning of the zodiac cycle, right? Okay, as far as professional wise, well, I started working with super gifted kids, and it's been a challenge because more than anything, as a teacher, I've had to kind of find new ways of working, because mainly my job consists of working with university students, or as you can say, like adults. But kids are different because they want to be, even though they're super gifted, they still want to be playing, not paying attention. And what I found kind of challenging is, maybe the first couple of classes, they don't know you. I've been at this school for maybe like 3 weeks now, And the first couple of classes, they don't know who you are, so you have the surprise element to your advantage, so they're paying attention because they want to know what you're about, who you are. But then after, you know 2 weeks, they know who you are, so now it's like they know how you're going to act, how you're going to be, right? And as a Taurus, with the routine inside of me, so that's where they start getting restless, right? They're like, I already know you're gonna be talking about some crap that I don't care about, right? And you're not gonna be making it fun, so whatever, right? And that's kind of like the challenge, right? Another challenge I've noticed is that there is like complete, see, I don't like to think of them. I mean, I do think of them as kids, but I also know that they're humans, so they're kind of like adults already. And a lot of the things adults do, kids do, and a lot of the things kids do, adults do, right? Like the social factor, the fact that there's like little, I mean, it's not so noticeable as in like high school or university or even the workplace, where it's like literally like these people only talk amongst themselves and they exclude everybody else. And then you have cliques, right? You have these cliques and those cliques, and then you have like the loners. um, but there's like an issue. I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but there is like some, or in this case, like one person that gets excluded, and this person gets excluded by the rest, and it basically boils down to not wanting to play with this other person, right? And this other person actually looking for that social connection. And I feel like a lot of that is translatable to our modern everyday society, right? Where like people will exclude others just because they don't like them, right? Or just because they don't like how they act or how they are, right? And not even, you could say, well, it's justifiable because this person plays rough or rough plays with the other kids, and they don't like that. He gets physical or she gets physical. But it could also be just because you're new, right? Like I've seen new kids that are kind of just like, who do I talk to? And then everybody else is like chatting amongst themselves, and this other kid's like excluded, and they don't want to integrate the kid because they don't know him, or just being unfriendly is what I'm talking about. And the Mexican culture, I think, prides itself on being friendly to foreigners, but I think it's only that, it's only friendly to foreigners, because when we're talking about amongst ourselves, we're really unfriendly. We're really, we're like any other culture. We exclude others, right? We evaluate their personas, and then we just think about, in practical terms, what we could get from people, right? Like they were saying, or I was seeing somewhere where they were saying that you could, like a friendship is basically an exchange, right, of different psychological needs or material needs or financial needs, or whatever needs that you have get satisfied by the friend, and vice versa, right? So when that stops, the transaction stops, the relationship stops, right? And then you may have people in the background that are kind of there, like not on reserve, but you just kind of know them, like think of your Facebook friends or whatever, people that you may not even talk to. Like I've seen a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to cleanse my friends, right? So if I eliminate you, like, I'm sorry, right? And, I can understand that it's kind of rude or kind of useless or stupid because whatever, it's just Facebook. But I can understand the logic behind it, because people can say, well, I have all these friends that maybe, on Facebook that I spoke to once, that I met once, and I don't need them, right? Because I've never used them, because, so it's like this idea of like having, like people would pride themselves. Like I remember like parents would pride themselves on saying, oh yeah, like I had a doctor friend, I had a lawyer friend, I had a mechanic friend. So these people aren't really your friends. You may treat them like friends or superficially talk to them like adults, but in reality, they're there for exchanges, right? Like if you get sick one day, well, you have a friend that's a doctor, you're going to go to your friend that's a doctor, right? Or even like recommendations, because it may benefit your friend that's a doctor, because then you may recommend somebody else to that friend, right? And I'm speaking more in terms of like private professionals, right? Like a lot of doctors don't work in hospitals. They'll set up their own office, right? And they'll have their own clients. Like a lot of psychologists do this too. Or they may group together, kind of like in a union, right? They may rent out a building or some space or a house and have, their clients go there. But I feel like that's also very hard to do, because you need to be you need to be your own company, right? So you need to market yourself, you need to administrate, your finances, whether or not you're paying taxes, for example. You need to coordinate like the schedules, plus you need to do the job, right? If you're a teacher, you need to teach. If you're a psychologist, you need to help the person out psychologically, whatever. If you're a mechanic also. So a lot of these people, I think when they start getting bigger, they get like a secretary, or they'll hire an accountant, or they may need a lawyer for certain things. I was also thinking, and I think I've spoken on this, like lawyer is one of the best professions, I think, that you can be, being a lawyer, because it's kind of like a superpower, right? How everything has to be, and you know how to get things done, right? Whether, like in suits, whether it's like corporate stuff or maybe in marketing stuff, right? Because I think lawyers, even though they may come across as very plain, like the office, the suit, that's it, they need to be very creative, right? They need to be creative in the way they solve problems. So if I tell you, I'm competing against this other company and I want to be making more money than this other company, right? And you go to your lawyer friend can't think up of a solution, a creative solution to come out on top, right? To have that advantage, right? Now that's in terms of like, how can I say it? In terms of company competitions, things like that, right? Which for me, business stuff, um, could come across as boring, but it's also very difficult to do it if you don't have any knowledge or experience in it, right? Um, what I want to say is like, for example, like Donald Trump, he came from a family of like business people, right? Like his father was a business person. Um, so then the ins and outs. But if like you're a person that like, whose father worked as like a maintenance person, and all of a sudden you want to become Mr. Donald Trump or businessman, or young entrepreneur, it's like you're probably not going to get anywhere, right? It's kind of like the rapping thing, right? Like the rapping thing, I've been struggling with it too, because a part of me still wants to be famous, still wants to make it as a rapper. But then another part of me is kind of like, just give it up. Like, that's not going to happen. You're almost 33. Like, you're not getting anywhere with that. Um, but it's kind of tough to let it go, right? And then you think to yourself, like, I just want to, work, or want to do it as like a hobby. But at the same time, you're kind of like, but I do, like, if I get famous accidentally, that will be really cool. And then it goes from that thought to like now having it as an expectation. Like, now I want to get famous, and then it's just like an old cycle, like an old friend, right? So again, I think that's very tough, because if you're trying out new things, like there are levels of new things that you can try out. Like, for instance, if I'm a university student, a university teacher, and I start working with kids now, I think that's a realistic, and that's kind of like what the Imago video talks about. Like, that's a realistic step, right? Of trying new things. Like, if you're working with adults as a teacher, and now as a teacher you're gonna work with kids, I think that's a good description of modifying your behavior and changing and adapting and learning new things, right? But if you want to make like a big jump from like being a teacher to being a rapper, when you have, not only do you lack experience, but you've never been in any contexts, like I'm watching the P. Diddy documentary right now, and I was watching like some Tupac documentaries before that. and checking out like their lives, and they always talk about how, they came from nothing. They're always like, yeah, like, these people were poor, they were living in the gutter, in the ghetto, and then all of a sudden they started doing what they started to do, and they just became famous out of nowhere. And it's like, no, they were in the contexts, right? Like P. Diddy went to a university where a lot of famous people went, right? And I think it's just like a ground that is brewing with that potential of people that are eventually going to be great or be famous or be rich and big, right? So if you're not in those circles, if you're not around those connections, around those people, then you're never gonna get there, right? Like P Diddy, I think maybe he didn't. I feel like he didn't even have to make an effort to get to where he was. I think he probably did it like sleeping, like he did that effortlessly because he was in the context. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't have to make decisions, right? And maybe tough decisions, but it's not like my situation, right? And I'm comparing myself to him and saying, what if all of a sudden I wanted to be like, great, and I wanted to make, or what if who's listening to me, all of a sudden want to be great at something? You know what they say, and I've spoken on this before too. Try hard, never give up, persist, be determined. Yeah, but that doesn't get you anywhere. If you want to persist all you want in your own little circle, you're never going to get anywhere until you meet the right people, until you're surrounded by the right context, right? So another thing I was talking about context, another thing I was just recently checking out these last couple of weeks is that idea of context. Now, they say context is important because when you're expressing something, when you're saying something, um, people are going to find it difficult to understand you unless you give them the context, which in this case, in English, that's when people say, oh, I see where you're coming from, right? So where you're coming from is a place, which is the context, right? So if I tell you, rappers have it easy or famous people have it easy, right? You're going to say, what? Well, what are you talking about? But then I have to explain this whole context of my idea of how I think that they're already running in the right circles with the right people, right? And they just basically have to walk there, right? They don't have to travel long distances. They don't have to, go completely out of their way or move to different areas. Like it's just a step away because they're already in the area. They're already in the context, right? So again, that's like context and context, right? But yeah, so that's my idea with context. And in this case, I think like I have had trouble um, identifying that idea of context and placing people within the right context because a lot of times the information I say is kind of raw, right? Like I give it to you raw, so I just come out and lay it on you like, oh, euphemisms, and you're like, whoa, where is this coming from? And I have, in the past, I have spoken on why I got to where I got with a certain idea, but other times I haven't, right? So I feel like it's important, but I also feel like if you don't get it, you don't get it, right? Like whatever, like I don't really care. And other times I feel like if I don't want to, I don't need to explain it, right? Again, you're either gonna get it or you're not. Even if I give you the context, the whole context, you may still not get it, right? Because you're not me, because you're not thinking, not because I'm better or something like that, but just because like it happens with myself too. Like I'll go back and watch a video or I'll go back and read something that I wrote before, that I said before, and I have no idea what I'm talking about, right? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like that makes no sense. This just happened recently with some notes that I made on a calendar, and I would like literally like I was reading what I wrote like a month ago, and I didn't know what the hell it said, so I just skipped it, and it was like a to-do list. So I'm not doing that, whatever that was, because I couldn't understand my own letter, like my own writing, right? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things that you may not even understand, even if you try, right? But I think on the other side of things, I think that it's important to understand that if you want to make someone understand, or maybe in this case they would be talking more about emotional persuasion, right? If you want to persuade someone, um, you can persuade them more by having them understand where you're coming from, understand your context, right? So I'm talking about this um, because of these reasons, right? Or because this happened, right? And then I was thinking about myself and, like my YouTube channel and how it's weird because it has like all these sorts of videos. And I know a lot of people will say, well, a YouTube channel should be about one thing only. So if you're going to make AI stories, only make AI stories. Or if you're going to upload music, only upload music. And I'm like, no, because it's my channel. I can do whatever I want. If I want, I can make a reaction video and upload it. If I want, I can make an AI story and upload it. If I want, I can make a video like this and just talk and vent for a while, and I can, it's my channel. And if people like that, good. If they don't, good, right? Like, but again, that may clash with this idea of like, well, then if you want to get famous, you aren't going to be able to do whatever you want. You need to move in line with certain trends and certain societal expectations, such as having a YouTube channel for only one thing, right, or one topic. So then it's like, how are you going to get to where you want to get in life if you are going to do whatever you want, right? You're like a kid, right? That's expecting certain things, but is doing other things that aren't going to get them the expectations or what they want, right? So yeah, that's as far as the professional area, the YouTube area. If one day I could make the YouTube area professional, that would be nice. Some of these ideas that I've been speaking on have actually been coming from a book. I have been I just recently bought this one, which is the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, and I finished this one. These are like Bibles, man. They're in Spanish because, well, I'm operating in Spanish. So this one, The Art of Seduction, I finished it, and now I'm reading this big old thing, which is the 48 Laws of Power. Um, if you want, I can talk about these books in a little bit. But the other book that I wanted to speak on, this is another book I'm reading by Herman Hesse, also in Spanish. I came across this other book on the internet like a month or two ago, called how highly effective people speak. And I wanted to read that book because I think I consider myself, like, maybe not highly effective, but I do, well, compared to most people that I'm surrounded by in my context, I do consider myself highly effective. I can get anything done, anything that is common every day, right? Like if I tell you, I'll see you on Monday at 3, I can get there at 3. I'm not gonna forget. I know how to get it done, right? Or if I tell you I'm gonna have this report by Sunday night at 6, I'll have it before then, like whatever, like, right? I know how to, you know, like administrate myself. I know how to organize myself. I know how to be effective, basically, right? And a lot of people will tell you like, yeah, I'll see you there on Monday at 3. And then at Monday at 3, they don't show up. And you're like, hey, where are you? And they'll be like, oh, I totally forgot. Like, and it's like, well, yeah, stupid, because you didn't write it down, because you need to organize yourself, because you need to have a system, because your memory isn't, God's memory. Like, you're not going to remember that stuff. So you need to have systems in place, right? And I have systems in place so I can get stuff done. Anyway, I don't know. I feel like books that I read influence me on a subconscious level, which I love, because you're not going to retain all the information consciously, but in your day-to-day, interactions long term, and the way that you act and speak to yourself and what you believe in, are basically affected by what you read, by what you see, by what you put in your mind, right? And I think one of the books that really helped me in this journey when I was like 19, 20 is a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I think I've spoken on this before too, but this book really helped me because I feel like it turned me into a highly effective person, right? And it's not only because of the 7 habits, but it's actually because as you read it, you understand a lot of things, and then you're able to better manage yourself and your time, right? So ever since then, I've been a very highly effective person. again, compared with my context. I can be taken to Japan and then I can be like mediocre or lazy compared to how the Japanese or other cultures or other people work, right? Or in different contexts too, right? Because I'm in the educational sector. So maybe in the, I don't know, corporate sector, it's different, and I would be maybe mediocre or lazy. Who knows, right? But yeah, the educational sectors like that, because teachers, they take it easy. They're teachers, whatever. It's not a big deal. I see students every day, so they may think to themselves that I see students every day. So if I miss a class or two or whatever, or if I show up late, it's no big deal. Or if I don't do this, or if I don't follow through with that other thing, whatever, right? But I'm not like that, because I like to be, I like to have integrity, right, and be responsible. So anyway, you know, communication for me has obviously been a problem. um, because I like to consider myself a person that knows how to talk and communicate, and I feel like I do know how to, at a basic level, obviously, and maybe even a little bit above that. But I feel like there are other people that communicate better in terms of they get what they want, or they seem to achieve more things with their communication, right? Like I can say, and communication deals with the other person, it doesn't deal with you, right? Because you could say, I'm very effective in isolation, right? I can get things done, my projects, my tasks, my chores, whatever, I can get those done on my own, right? By myself in isolation, and that's good, right? But what about working with other people? What about getting other people to give you, more hours, more pay raise, more opportunities? What about that? That I'm not really good at, right? So I figured this book would really help me out, because it's how highly effective people communicate. And I've been taking away a lot of lessons from this book. A lot of the lessons are kind of like from Robert Cialdini's book, or these ideas. And these ideas are actually very popular right now, because I've seen on X or Twitter a lot of posts, a lot of tweets on this, a lot of, what do they call them? The lists on X or Twitter, right? I've seen a lot of them where it's like, the confirmation bias, the consistency bias. A lot of them are biases. So basically what this book also, how it starts off, is basically by saying, you know humans are lazy, or they're not lazy, but they want to conserve energy, right? They want to have reservation of energy. So this also happens when they think. So they take shortcuts. And what we need to do to be able to be like more persuasive is basically know those shortcuts and use those shortcuts against people, right? So if I know that a person will, for example, the consistency bias or the consistency principle, I know that if a person already said that they love dogs, and then I ask them to donate to a dog charity or a dog shelter, they're more prone to do it because they need to be consistent with themselves, right? I think I've spoken on this too. And the reason why they wouldn't go back on it is because then they would look inconsistent, which could be crazy, right? Which could be detrimental to survival as a species. Like a lot of it goes back to, our primitive instincts and our primitive condition. And a lot of communication that is influential is emotional more than rational. So like it tells you, like, never talk about statistics, never talk about facts. People don't want to hear that stuff. Like they don't really care, even though people say they do, they really don't. What they want to hear is, emotional stuff. Appeal to the emotion, to the pathos, right? To people's sentiment. So that book basically has a lot of that stuff in it, and how to use different techniques. Which again, like all of this, I'm not gonna remember it consciously. I don't even remember it right now, but that's what I've been doing. Which I'm actually I got like halfway through that book already, and I'm going to rotate into other books, because I have like a lot of different books I'm reading at once. Well, not at once, but like I'll read one for a while, and then I'll go to another one, and I'll go to another one. So I had stopped doing that because I was only reading this one, how highly effective people communicate. But now I'm actually going to start getting into that cycle again, because well, I'm halfway through it. So, I also need the information to like sit there and, so I'm able to like produce it later on, right? Or think about it. Okay, and anyway, the 48 Laws of Power is very interesting by Robert Greene because, mm, well, I feel like I need to read these books to be able to have like changes in my life, right? And the 48 Laws of Power starts off with a very important power principle, which is don't cast a shadow on your boss, basically, or on the person of authority. And I feel like that one's very important because it deals with how you should act with someone who is in a position of authority, right? How you shouldn't show off, how you shouldn't, and I feel like this principle is very important in terms of how others view you and your boss, or the relationship between you and your boss, right? It's not so much with your boss, because I could say that you can impress your boss, and if you read the book you'll know what I'm talking about. But it basically talks about how uh, like not to make your boss look bad by appearing to be or know better than your boss, right? So you obviously need to impress your boss because your boss needs to have you close to him or her, right? But you shouldn't do this in front of others, right? And they talk about like how Galileo actually like was involved with a king and like his three brothers, the Medici brothers or something like that, and how he ended up naming Jupiter's moons, which Galileo discovered after the kings, or after the king and his brothers, to kind of like make them look good, right? So it's like anything that you do good, or like really nice, you should basically give your boss like the credit, and that way you will be closer to power, right? So that's like the tip. The opposite of doing that is like making yourself look good, like, oh yeah, like I'm the bomb, when you're not even in the position of power yet, because ultimately what that's going to get you is, kicked out of the royal court, as they say. And it's very interesting because this book, and I keep saying it's very interesting, but it is, the royal court, how it operated back in the day, is this idea, right, of like the king and all his or her, like the people around the king or queen, and how they would be like, playing these like Game of Thrones mind games, psychological warfare amongst themselves to basically get closer to the power, right, to the king or the queen. And it's so interesting again because that is how you can basically view any group, right? And you may think, well, that only happens like at a president level or at corporate level, CEO, presidents, world leaders. And it's like, no, that happens like at a family level, that happens in your workplace, right? And just notice the dynamics, right? Like in a family, who's the boss, right? Your mom or your dad, and then everybody else is trying to like, you know uh like House of Cards their way, to the advantage of the person in power, and especially in the workplace, right? That also happens in the workplace. So the first one deals with the boss, right? And the second power principle deals with the people that are your equals, right? How to basically distrust friends, right? So get away or try to keep friends at a distance, because they see the idea with friends, or the idea behind friends is very counterintuitive, because the conventional logic will tell you, the better you treat a friend, the more loyal and trustworthy they will be. But actually, the opposite happens because you condition your friends to expect more from you. So if you give and give and give your friends because you love them, because you appreciate them, because you value them, they're only going to want more. And when you can't give more, or when they're in a position to take over, and basically screw you, they will do it, because they will justify themselves psychologically, seeing that you have always given them stuff, right? So that's the counterintuitive logic with friends. And then again, like another counterintuitive idea is that enemies actually make the most loyal subjects. the most trustworthy people. So they like there's a tip that says if you don't have enemies, make enemies. Find a way to make enemies. So find a way to basically create this friction with people, uh, because that's going to benefit you long term, right? Like if you and it does kind of make sense. Like like you can say this isn't a principle until now that it's being like explicitly elaborated as a principle, but if you notice certain human interaction patterns, it does happen like that, right? Like you'll fight with someone, right? Just naturally, like you don't like someone, that person doesn't like you, you fight, bah, whatever, and then maybe in a couple of weeks or months or years, you're forced to collaborate with that person again. And then it's like you guys are more than good with each other, right? You're more attentive than you would be with a friend, right? You're careful not to, make a slight or make a mistake or an accident, right? You work better with the person, right? And it's because there's that like respect, you could kind of say, right? Of, think of two people brawling in the street, fighting, and after they both fight, they shake hands, right? Like they respect each other, right? Even though they were just enemies. So you may think like, why would you, they say keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. That's basically the logic here. So that like when they say keep your friends close, it's basically keep them at a distance because your enemies should be closer, not so much because you need to watch them, but because you need to use them, right? Because they're going to benefit you, right? So that's like the logic there. I've only gotten to the second principle right now, and they're very short principles because it's a big book, so it has to talk about 48 principles, 48 laws of power. um, but yeah, anyway, what I'm doing is like that's my logic, like having it, be fed into my subconscious, into my unconscious, and then eventually later on when I need these things, I won't even know they're coming from there, but I'll have that information available and I'll be able to use it and produce it. So that's kind of the thing there. So yeah, this video is already 42 minutes long, and well, that's what I've spoken on YouTube, some ideas, professional context. I'm giving this other subject on epistemology. So that's the study of knowledge, or the study of how right? So it's getting like very meta. And I'm having fun with it. Like right now, I wouldn't really say it started off like excellent. I mean, it did, but it didn't. And I think it has to do a lot with the hour of the day in which I give this subject, because typically I would teach in the morning, but now I teach at 1 in the afternoon. So by 1, students are kind of tired. So I feel like it's that's going to kind of be a little obstacle, but I'll figure out a way around that. Again, like you need to figure out ways around new obstacles, new challenges, but within your own context, right? And yeah, like basically, if you, like I mentioned already, if you want to make people understand you better and be more influential, they need to know the context, right? I think as soon as people know the context, they're like, oh, okay, I understand where you're coming from, right? Like the reason why I have a YouTube channel that's so mixed with things is because I don't want to create a YouTube channel every time I have a new idea, because then I would probably only have like a couple videos in that channel and that's it, right? So I'll get inspired to do something for a little bit, like the freestyle sessions, but then I'll stop doing them and I'll go back and revisit them if I want to. If I don't, I won't, right? So I figured I'll just have one channel and that's it, right? And then if I explain this to you, you won't think I'm weird or just lazy, and you'll say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I see why you're doing this now, right? And understanding is in a way influential, right? Again, the person can decide to be persuaded by it or not, as they say, but you basically made your case, right? You argue your case, and I think that's important. um, and yeah, so as far as YouTube information and work wise, I think that's pretty much everything for now. So yeah, I thought I'd make this little update, let you guys know what I've been doing. And as far as the future, Again, I'll be working on that album soon. But there's really no route for me right now. I guess it's just keep learning, especially working with kids and seeing how, what is the best way to teach them and keep them engaged with the information, with school. And I'm, in the epistemology course. And with YouTube, just keep making the AI stories and see if they're interesting for people and see, like it's weird that I'm getting like viewership. I'm guessing from these stories, even though when I upload a story, it doesn't really have views until later. So I'm guessing it's people that aren't on my channel, but maybe are like, like the video will appear and, AI right now is, if you see an AI image, it's kind of interesting. So people will like click on it, just watch it, maybe subscribe. I've done that. I've watched the video, and without going to the channel, I'll just like subscribe and whatever, right? I'm like, okay, in case like they make another one similar to this and the algorithms or whatever. So I'm thinking it has to do something with that, right? But yeah, anyway, let me know what you think if you want on this video, and that's all I got for this one. So I'll see you in the next one, right? Peace.